Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar hosted by CBX Software and Inside Fashion. Now, my name is Mander. I'm the marketing director for CBX Software and also the moderator for today's session. Now, first of all, we'll start with some household rules. The webinar will run for 40 minutes. The webinar will be recorded and it will be available for download after the event. All attendees will be muted during the webcast, and if you have any questions regarding this webinar, please feel free to contact me on the email address on the screen. Now, I just want to quickly introduce our speaker. Our presenter today is Jen Singer. Jen is the Director and Head of Market Intelligence at Inside Fashion. Now, Jen has over 20 years industry experience and is a regular speaker on key industry topics, including consumer research, industry outlook, and trends at major international trade fairs and seminars around the world. Now, in today's session, Jen will share with us her latest views on the latest trends in apparel and general merchandise global sourcing. Now, on that note, I'm just going to pass it to Jen and let her take it from here.
Thanks so much, Mander, and a big shout out to CBX for including us in a very exciting webinar series that you guys have been hosting. So today we're going to be looking at the 5 things that we're watching for 2017. So these are not the only things that we're watching, but these are the top 5. We're looking at changes in order sizes. Quality is now a priority. China is becoming a buyer, Vietnam is rising, and new routes to new markets. And we'll also touch upon, a few early predictions about U.S. international trade, which has become quite a controversial subject. So just a little bit of a background on who we are and what we do. Inside Fashion is a market intelligence company. We have a variety of reports that we do throughout the year that pull together our research, as well as including input from other key sources. And we do Inside Fashion, which is a monthly global overview. We have fashion technology. We do inside sourcing, frontline reports. We touch on what's selling, next big thing. We have our annual report on, and our quarterly current situation in sourcing. So this is information that we are gathering hands-on. So what you're hearing, in this webcast and also in our reports is information that we get from face-to-face meetings with executives, factory visits, interviews with industry specialists, data analysis, our own consumer research, and also trade fair reporting. So we're using all these sources and pulling together insights that we're sharing in our publications and that we'll be sharing with you today. So let's first touch upon order sizes. For the past few years, we've been seeing a lot of downward pressure on order sizes, and we expect that we'll be seeing that going forward. Fast fashion, of course, has certainly impacted the industry. People want to have lower inventories. They want to put something out on the retail floor, see how it sells. If it works, order more. If not, get on to the next thing. But also, we're seeing that consumers are buying fewer items. So they're wanting to buy fewer things, but they're also looking at better quality. And that's a topic in and of itself that we're not really going to go into in this particular webinar. But it's a very important trend that we see happening in the market. So we just see in general, people are buying fewer individual items, which is also impacting order sizes. And then, of course, sort of a corollary to that is the move away from basics to more personalized items. So again, from those big volume orders of basics onto smaller orders of more personalized apparel. So over the past 3 years, we've seen in general, going across all suppliers, of course, some of them are doing better and some of them worse, but in general, we've seen a 20 to 30% decrease in order size. Now that doesn't mean that a particular factory won't be doing the same annual volume, but the actual size for each order has gone down. So the impact on the industry, particularly in Asia, Asia was really set up to handle big volume orders. The whole, offshore sourcing was really built upon being able to do 100,000 dozen of, one style and one color. So these factories were set up to be able to mass produce like that. So it's been tough, particularly for some of the legacy factories, because they have to rethink their strategy. And it sounds like it's easy, but it's easy to understand conceptually. It's a lot more difficult to actually implement. So this is something that factories are just having to look at. Um, to hold on to volume orders, many Chinese factories have had to lower their price because they're competing with Southeast Asia and with Bangladesh. So we've seen, particularly within China, factories, really bringing prices down to rock bottom or to even, less than bottom. We also see on the, in a different strategy that Chinese factories are moving into much higher level, much more skilled production. So, almost becoming artisans or craftsmen, in a sense, leveraging the fact that they can handle this kind of a complex order, this kind of highly skilled workmanship, and going in that direction where it's less of a price-driven purchase, but more of you know, can you make this for us kind of a purchase. So that's moving towards higher end brands and higher end products. And the other thing that we're seeing with regard to this is there's an increased reliance on technology, both software and hardware, to handle more complicated supply chains and to be able to shorten the speed to market. So in addition, we're also seeing manufacturers move to a shared capacity model. And again, that's a topic in and of itself, but it's quite interesting to see how factories that have huge capacity are starting to work with other manufacturers to share capacity so that they don't have to continually increase their own capacity, but that gives them more flexibility. And I'm not referring to, outsourcing things or subcontracting. This is where someone is actually, it's like a leased space where they're bringing in their own, sometimes workers, but definitely middle to senior management to run that production to make sure the QC is. They're just simply using idle machinery. So it's a very interesting development. It's not widespread, but we are seeing some of the more advanced people in the industry starting to implement this. The next thing that we think that is particularly interesting is China is becoming a buyer. For many, many years, China was, as they said, the world's factory. And it still is to a great extent. But increasingly, the growing domestic market is making China a buyer. China is certainly increasingly buying raw materials that are, yarns and fabrics, and they're also taking up a lot of the production capacity to make things that are sold to the domestic consumer market. The domestic consumer market is a growing market in terms of consumer purchases. Employment is quite stable. People have a certain amount of pent-up demand. So, and the size of the market alone, it takes a lot to supply a market of that size. So increasingly, we're seeing suppliers selling into China, whereas previously they weren't interested at all. Even domestic suppliers were just doing export, no interest in selling domestically. Now we're seeing a lot of interest, and an increasing percent of their business is to domestic. So domestic brands will pay a premium to get better materials. That again is attracting a lot of people, particularly because when you're selling in the export markets, price pressure is just an ongoing hurdle. So the fact that domestic guys will pay more makes it attractive. And the domestic market is so competitive that there's a big demand for unique materials and for trims, for garment styles. So again, that's driving their demand to look for not only domestic suppliers, but also foreign suppliers. We're finding a lot of the top European fabric manufacturers are selling into China, and they're telling us that what they're selling into China is actually their better products, their higher end products, not the low end of their collections. So, we expect that this will continue. We think that increasingly, the Chinese buyers will become more aggressive on pushing for cheaper prices, but we also think that because they're taking up some of the capacity, it might start to create a floor on suppliers' prices. So it's something that we're keeping an eye on, not just for this year, but also for the next 5 years. So again, if you look at the impact on industry, as I mentioned previously, Chinese-based buyers for the domestic market are absorbing a lot more capacity and are enabling mills to have a little better margin. Right now, from the suppliers that we're talking to, about 30 to 50% of their sales are going to Chinese domestic suppliers, buyers, up from about 10 to 20% 3 years ago. Thirdly, we see Vietnam rising. Now, this is not really a surprise. I mean, Vietnam has certainly been in the news because of TPP for so many years. There was so much discussion about the impact of TPP on Vietnam. Also, the fact that China prices continue to go up. So everybody's looking for a China plus one or a China alternative. And Vietnam became very much the sourcing location of choice for people who needed to do a little better, but not as expensive as what you would get in China. If you look at Vietnam right now, it has the right combinations of skills and prices. Prices are lower than China, but the skills are better than Bangladesh, and they can handle order sizes that are smaller than Bangladesh. The free trade agreement with Europe has basically been signed and is just being finalized. And there's another free trade agreement that they have with the Eurasian Economic Union, which is Russia and the Baltic states. Plus, they have free trade agreements, throughout ASEAN and through Asia and Australia and New Zealand and India. So Vietnam has got a lot going. Even without TPP, and it looks like at this time, and it's very hard to tell because President-elect Donald Trump has not even gotten into office yet. So yes, he's talking about not being part of TPP. Whether that will happen or not, we don't really know. But even without TPP, Vietnam has a lot of opportunities just because of the pricing and because of the skills. The proximity to China enables it to import fabrics pretty quickly. Fabric, obviously, raw materials is obviously one of the negatives because they don't have a sufficient domestic supply. But otherwise, Vietnam certainly is very well positioned to be picking up a lot of business. And obviously, there's a lot of investment that's gone into increasing capacity there. If you look at the impact on the industry, there's continued investment in mills, particularly from Korean, Taiwanese, mainland Chinese companies who are putting a lot of money in there in order to not only grow garment production, but to try to expand domestic raw materials. On the downside, we expect that the rapid expansion of the textile industry will be putting upward pressure on wages, just as it has in China. I mean, this rush into the market, not only of the apparel industry, but you also have other industries that are coming in that are offering alternative employment opportunities. So all of this will definitely be making it a lot more competitive in order to attract workers, to attract the better workers. Definitely, wages will go up. Whether the minimum wage goes up isn't really as material as the fact that the actual wage that a factory will have to pay to attract a skilled worker will become more and more competitive in the coming years. Another thing that we think is quite interesting is that as these factories are being built, automation is being built into the factory to boost worker production. So it's not the old days of just the, quick and easy set up a factory as fast as possible and as cheaply as possible. Most of the manufacturers are understanding that you have to start with thinking about efficiency and productivity. So, this is where Vietnam is right now. So, all of this bodes well in terms of making it an attractive apparel source. The next thing that we're looking at is demand for better quality. I know that, certainly at the retail level, there's still a lot of focus on price-driven models, but in the research that we've done through Inside Fashion Consumer Lab, consumers across the board are very knowledgeable about quality, and they want good quality. They no longer accept poor quality. It's no longer a matter of, oh, it looks nice and it's cheap. It's got to look nice, and it has to be good quality. People are not buying the quantity, I think, as we mentioned earlier, but that puts them in a position where there's much more thought about quality. And quality, essentially, from a consumer point of view, is defined as fit and as fabric quality. Those are the two key criteria. And people will pay a little bit more for something that's better. A little bit more. We're not trying to imply that somebody who was shopping at Walmart yesterday is now going to be, shopping at designer collections tomorrow. But people are definitely conscious of what they're buying, and they will be looking for something better. In a sense, the bad news is that sometimes trading up means trading out. So somebody who accepted what you have when they were looking more at price might be looking for a different brand or a different retailer when they're looking for something better. People said that quality was important or very important when choosing apparel, and fabric was rated as very important. So people are looking at the hand feel, they're looking at durability. There's multiple factors that we sometimes in the industry think that consumers are not knowledgeable about or don't care about. But in fact, yes, they do care. So the impact on industry, there's tremendous added value in adding trims and embellishment and anything that can make a garment stand out and look like it's special and look like it's worth paying more for. Likewise, trading up on the quality of fabric and yarn. A lot of the quality has been engineered out of garments in an effort to bring down prices. However, right now, a wiser strategy would be to try to engineer some of that quality back in. It will mean prices will be a little bit higher, but if the consumer sees and believes that the garment is better, they will pay more. They will not pay more simply because prices went up. But if they see that they're actually getting something that's better, and it takes a certain effort to convince them of that. But assuming that they're able to see that, this way it justifies a higher price. So therefore, blending with branded fibers or using an entirely pure branded fiber is another way to add value. And this is necessary. To do that effectively, you need to have hang tags and labeling and so forth that calls it out, that explains the benefits. We're also seeing factories are looking to increase their skills at making more complex garments. People are telling us they no longer want to be the cheapest. They now want to be able to be the best. They want to be able to show that they can do something that's beyond what the competitor can do. And finally, we're looking at new routes and new markets. So speed to market remains key. There's a trade-off between price and speed. So people are looking to see how do they manage both. For mid-tier brands, China's Eurasian rail is becoming increasingly important. For the moment, it's not been doing too much on the apparel category, more furniture and electronics, but we see going forward that it will be particularly impactful on bringing goods from China into Europe and Russia, as well as bringing goods from Russia into China, because as we said, China is becoming an important buyer. China is investing a lot in infrastructure, and rail links are a big part of their One Belt, One Road plan. So we can expect to see further development of this, not just, obviously to satisfy the garment industry, but just in general, in order to to bring up the economic development of the entire nation. So as those rail links are being brought in, it creates an increasingly important opportunity for trade between China and Europe and all the states in between as those markets also continue to grow. Right now, more than 12 Chinese cities and 8 European cities are hubs. So, and there's a different branch of this that goes into Russia. There's a third line could possibly run through Myanmar, Bangladesh, India, Turkey. You can see that it's, it's quite comprehensive. It won't do much for people who are exporting to the U.S., but for the rest of the world, we feel this is something to be watched. They're expecting at the border between China and Kazakhstan that they'll be processing 1 million TEUs of cargo within 5 years. So, this is a considerable trade route. So the impact on industry, certainly from the point of sourcing, it could help drive manufacturing into central and western China. And I mean, this has sort of been a conundrum because on the one hand, moving out of the coastal cities is important because the price is too high. On the other hand, moving further north or further west has been a problem in terms of speed to market because you lose time having to get those things all the way to the coast. In addition to moving raw materials, which are being made at mills that are in the coastal regions, to factories that are further away. However, as these rail links increase, this could open up opportunities. So it may actually keep China back in the running as an important garment manufacturing source. So just for the whole intra-Asia and even Asia-Europe logistics, we feel the development of these rail links is very, very impactful. So, looking at U.S. trade policy, which everybody seems to be looking at, I would say don't expect anything too dramatic to happen too soon. I mean, yes, President-elect Donald Trump said that he's going to be pulling out of TPP, but we're not in TPP. So frankly speaking, everybody's concerned about that, but it isn't really a loss since we haven't gotten it to begin with. If he says he's pulling out of it, maybe he will be pulling out of it, but that doesn't preclude the U.S. and any nation establishing bilateral trade agreements that could have a whole different set of implications. So I think we have to take a wait and see approach on that. In terms of any trade agreement that the U.S. makes, it's not just about apparel. We look at it from apparel because that's the industry that we work in, but there's many other industries that have vested interests for or against trade agreements. So any agreement tends to have a lot of different negotiation going on there as to who gets what and how. So I would say that nothing will happen too quickly on this. So right now we're expecting it to be as it is pre-TPP, which is where we are anyway. The market reaction is actually more impactful than what's actually happened. So it's people reacting to Trump saying that he wants to pull out of TPP more than having pulled out of an agreement that we're not in anyway. So this is what's, playing more havoc with the market than anything that's actually taken place. Even if TPP were to have gone through exactly as it was prior to the presidential election, there were still a lot of clauses in that agreement that made it very complicated and very risky for importers and exporters. So it wasn't as sweet a deal for everybody as it sounded. In general, we advise our readers and our clients don't read everything you see in mass media, social media, rogue sources, lots of clickbait out there that just drive you crazy and scare you. Basically, I wouldn't be expecting anything too radical to be happening too quickly from from all the sources that we've spoken to. We expect that there'll be change, but that it will not be as radical as what people are expecting. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up. I wish everybody a very prosperous year ahead. If there's any questions, please feel free to either ask me now, or if you think of something later on, my email address will be coming up right here. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time. It'd be my pleasure to speak with you.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Okay, thank you, Jen. That was very insightful, and thank you everyone for attending today's event. Now, before we wrap up, I just want to let you know that this webinar is sponsored by CBX Software, and it is a part of our ongoing Global Sourcing Thought Leadership Series. Now, the CBX Thought Leadership Series education series includes many webinars like the one you've just attended, as well as other industry reports and white papers. Our effort is focused on providing actionable insights for retailers and brands like yourselves on how you can improve your global sourcing, quality, and supply management programs. Now, if you want to find out more about the CBX Thought Leadership Series, please go to the URL on the screen. Now, to conclude, I just want to thank you again for attending today's session. We hope you found the webinar useful and informative, and would certainly like to have you again at our next event. Thank you, and if you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact either Jane or myself on the email address on the screen. Thank you, and have a good day.